Welcome everyone to another SBDC webinar. Thank you for joining us this Tuesday afternoon. Um, Today is going to be great for me and for you because you're not just going to sit there and listen to me talk to you about marketing or something for the next hour. You're going to get to hear all different voices. You're not going to have to hear too much from me. But the best thing is the variety of the people that you're all going to hear from today, because as you can see on our screen, we've got four panelists. Um, going to share about their experiences in business. So if you haven't heard, if the Maine Small Business Development Center is a no cost confidential business advising service. If you haven't connected with a business advisor, we always recommend you register and get one-on-one advising. We help folks with things like business plans, growing their business, marketing, exiting, finances, all of that fun stuff, that you didn't necessarily get into business because you love to do. You can work with an SBDC advisor on that. But like I said, today's conversation is really about hearing from folks who have been in it, who are entrepreneurs themselves, have been in business for several years, varied backgrounds, varied industries you're going to hear from. And I'm going to ask them about the good, the bad, and the ugly of their experience running their business. And I'm hoping they'll share with you candidly. And please feel free as we go to put questions you have for them or things you might like them to talk about in the chat. I'm just going to put a chat in there so you can all see that pop up. I'm not 100% sure if we're going to have time at the end to get to questions, but I'll keep an eye on it. And if one of you asks a really awesome question, I'll interject and we'll make sure we get it covered. But so feel free to put questions in the chat as you hear our panelists talk. You're going to hear them first kind of give a brief bio in the beginning. So I'm sure you may hear some things that spark your attention and interest. So feel free to put questions in for specific panelists. But with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over. I'm going to take myself out of the spotlight here so you can just see our four panelists. And thank you for being here. I think everyone's going to be really excited to hear what you have to say. So to get started, I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourselves. Tell me, your name, what your business is or businesses, if you have a background in other businesses you've owned that are relevant to this conversation, or if you own multiple businesses now. Just a brief idea of how long you've been in the game so people can know, from your experience today, what you're talking about, if you're brand new to business or if you've been in it for a long time. And if there's anything else you'd like our panelists, or I'm sorry, you'd like our attendees to know about you, now's the time to chime in with that as well. So I'm going to start with Heather, simply because I see she's off mute. So that's why you're the guinea pig. So Heather, go ahead.
Great. My name is Heather Fogg, and I'm a registered nurse and nationally certified foot care specialist. I'm the owner and CEO of Fundamental Foot Care in Hamden. And we are all nurses who provide routine foot care, primarily for the senior population, but all ages. And we do medically based foot care because there is a severe need for care, particularly for seniors. We don't have enough podiatrists, and we don't take the place of podiatrists, but we help fill that gap. I was a registered nurse at Northern Light Eastern Maine Medical Center for 8 years and was a medical surgical nurse. I took care of people before and after amputations every day, and uncontrolled diabetes, vascular issues, uncontrolled blood sugars and infections. And I felt that there was a way to prevent this. In fact, about 80% of diabetic-related amputations are preventable. But due to the healthcare situation the way it is right now, we're not operating on a preventive type plan overall in general. I started the business back in 2019 when I went to Seattle, Washington, and I trained with a podiatrist out there. That was the person that was most well known out there. There's not a lot of training available. I saw it as a way to get away from the bedside and long hours, although I loved being a nurse at the hospital. It was a way to get away from the bedside and have more flexibility and control over my own time, but also to provide a very, very needed service. And I love working with the elderly. They need compassion and respect, and there's a huge loneliness factor out there as well. Um, so it feeds me. It's very fulfilling. I also really like to empower other nurses to do things that they like to do within the scope of practice of a nurse. So I also train other nurses in the area of foot care. Um, I was doing business out of my vehicle for 4 years and then opened the brick and mortar here in Hamden 2 years ago because it had grown so much. And very glad I did. It's a lot. It's a lot, expense and a lot to be concerned with, and employees and all of that. I'm fortunate that prior to being in healthcare, and some other things, I was in the automobile business for the better part of 20 years. So I got a lot of marketing and that kind of stuff background, probably enough to be dangerous. But it has helped me in my business ownership. So, and we have nurses here, and I also now have two nurses in the Portland area. So that's my background.
Thank you, Heather.
Sure.
Let's go to Seth next.
Hi, my name is Seth Holt. My wife and I own a daycare center in Bangor for 75 children, serving 6 weeks to 5 years. We've been in business since September of 2022. And prior to that, in terms of entrepreneurship, I helped start a retail company in New Hampshire. And I did that for 8 years or so before moving on. And now I focus my time on helping my wife in the childcare industry and continuing to look for new business ventures as well as we speak.
Thanks, Seth. Let's go to Jordan.
Um, Hi, so I'm Jordan. I own a natural skincare, hair care, and home cleaning care product-based business out of Rockland. Currently, I work in my apartment, so I don't have a storefront quite yet, a little smaller scale. I sell at pop-up markets and festivals year-round. I've probably done over 350 different festivals and markets. I also sell online on my website and wholesale. So currently I have my products in 7 different stores across the state of Maine, with hopefully a couple more to come by the end of the year. I've been in business since February of 2022, so I'm about to head into my 4th year. Um, yeah, I don't have any employees or anything. It's just me, so it's a lot smaller scale than Heather over there.
Perfect. And Vian.
Thanks, Sally. Hi, everyone. My name is Bien DeBuy. I'm currently an advisor with SBDC. I cover Lewiston, York County, and Portland, Maine. But on the side, kind of, as much as it can be, I run 2 restaurants in Portland. One of which, the first one opened in 2017, and the second one opened May 2024. Prior to that, um, I was a partner at a cafe bakery also that opened in 2014. So, a little over 10 years of small business ownership, um, on like a medium small scale, or still small scale, but like each location having about 10 to 20 employees, um, and each one doing about, a little over $1 million in revenue each location. And then prior to moving to Maine, I worked in coffee. I worked in for like a boutique coffee company that started with like 3 locations in San Francisco, and I helped them grow from that to 13 locations nationally before I left. So a lot of scale in food and beverage operations, and a lot of my background is in. I mean, I just learned as I went, but I really found myself drawn to food and beverage and operations, but also um, the HR part of it, like hiring staff, training staff, finding good people, and retaining them. So that I find that to be a large part of my interest in running a business.
Wow, thank you all. I'm sitting here thinking I'm patting myself on the back as I look at you four because I'm just creating a list of all of the various experience, the industries you're all touching on, the background. So I mean, childcare, retail, food, product, e-commerce, wholesale, home-based, several employees, some of you, contractors versus W-2, talking about human resources, marketing background, and I maybe in hearing some experience of working for larger companies and scaling up and all of that. So I'm like pretty impressed with the diversity of information we're going to have in this room today and the different perspectives. I'm sure you're all sitting there listening to each other and you're like, oh, wow, they did that and they did that. Well, I'm only this. But I can tell you each have some special flavor that you're bringing to this conversation. And I don't know who the, 19 participants that we have on the call are. I guess 19 minus four. Um, but I think each of them is going to connect to there's going to be something that each of the four of you say today that somebody takes home or that inspires them or that they carry with them for years and years. So super excited to get into this. Thank you all for giving your backgrounds. The first question's the hardest. So spoiler alert, Vianne, I'm going to come to you. Got to pick on the inside man here.
Okay.
Um, so today we're going to start with you. Everyone else is going to get hit though. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, like I said. So we're going to rip the Band-Aid off and start right with the ugly. What is something in your businesses now, so in your restaurants, that you would do differently if you could go back and start again?
Yeah. I think this I um the main lesson for me is undercapitalization. Is what we say this a lot as business advisors. Basically, it's not getting enough money to start your business, right? And I think And I did the first time with the first restaurant, and I was like, I'm not doing that again. And then lo and behold, the second time around, I did it again. I think what happens is, as an entrepreneur with that mindset, you're always like, I can make it work. Like I can figure it out as I go, no matter what the circumstances are. I can keep changing what my plan is. As long as I have the core of my business, I can sort of figure it out as I go. And you hit roadblocks, things happen that you can't plan on, and it affects your budget, right? And it affects your plan. And instead of slowing down and rethinking my financing and finding more, to be honest, and giving myself more runway, um, I just kept pushing to open, and it's specific to restaurants too, right? Because you're renting a space, you start training employees, like the timeline of your opening can be really stressful. Um, but I see, in my work as a business advisor now, I see a lot of people in other industries like potentially falling into that trap too, because it's the same mindset, right? No matter what industry it is, if you are ambitious enough to start your own business and confident enough in your abilities, it's very common for you to think that you could sort of get over any obstacle, and you can, but then you come to opening, and then you shortened your capital runway from 6 months, a year to just 3 to 4 months, right? And then now you encounter this whole other set of problems. So for me, that's my biggest takeaway is just starting off on the right foot, avoiding the trap of undercapitalization.
I don't think anyone on the call can relate to wanting more money. I mean, come on, man. Like, let's try
Right.
and keep it relatable here. No, no, I'm just being funny. So Vian, starting out, sort of jumping in, letting the excitement override the need for I need to make sure I'm appropriately capitalized. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. Let's go to Jordan. What is your something you would do differently if you could go back and start again almost 4 years ago?
So this one took me forever to, 'cause, we got these questions before this meeting. It took me forever to think about how to answer here because there's so many things I probably would have changed. But the one that really stuck with me was that I would have started my business with the idea that I was going to hand over the reins to somebody else. Because I consistently make things far more complicated than they need to be for myself. And then I'm just like, it's fine, I can handle it, I can deal with it, it's fine. Because I don't know. It's my little quirk that I do. But a story that I'll tell you is that I do markets almost every weekend, and one of the markets that I had this things just kept happening and tumbling and whatnot, and I ended up having three markets on the same day. And like I said before, it's just me, so I didn't really have any employees that I could ask to run those extra markets. So hopped on the phone with my mom, got my boyfriend involved. So each of them ran a market for me. But there's so many aspects to running a market that things that can go wrong. So I was like, how can I make it as simple as possible? So I restructured everything. I brought less product. I tweaked prices. They were more consistent. Just made it as simple as I possibly could, like a dummy's guide to marketing. And one of the things that I did was I bought one of those like beach style wagons so that they wouldn't have to heave and hoe and carry everything inside from the parking lot to the venue. And that's something that I had seen other makers, had these wagons. I was like, oh, it must be so nice, must be so nice. I'm carrying all these like super heavy totes and like pounds and pounds, like 160 pounds of weights. And anyways, I got them this wagon and they used it. And then I went back to running the markets myself and I'm using this wagon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting set up at like a quarter of the time that it took me before. And so there's just this tiny, tiny little like investment. It was like $100 for a wagon that I invested in because I was hoping to make something more convenient for somebody else in my business and not myself, ended up saving me tons of time so I could, get a little extra sleep before a market, which makes me a more pleasant person when I'm trying to sell my products. And it also gave me just more energy to, be able to represent my products and tell people about them, be excited and I was honestly just like less exhausted in general because like I said, doing a market, setting up, tearing down, packing up, it's a lot of work. So just like I would think about your business and make it as simple as possible. I mean, if you're just getting started, I would just take a step back and be like, wait, is this like as simple as it can possibly be, or am I making it too much? Because it's a lot easier to start simple than it is to backtrack and try to make your complex systems more simple. But yeah, that's probably the best advice that I could give also and like give to myself if I could start again.
Sure, sure. A theme that we work with folks on a lot is sort of that being proactive, prepared to grow, prepared to scale up so that you don't have to react when all of a sudden you book those three markets and it's like, oh, now I got to find a way. And it works. That's how a lot of magic happens when you're, um, sort of pedal to the metal and under pressure, but certainly stress happens as well. Perfect. Thank you. Heather, what about you? What's something you would do differently if you could go back and do it again? Oh, Heather, you're muted.
I can relate to both of you and your what you felt were things you would do different. Um, I think one of the biggest things that I would do differently is to know the value of my service that I give because I underpriced, thinking that people wouldn't pay it. Um, so consequently, as I grew um, and had more overhead, I had to really do some, cost analysis, uh, with Ally's help, of course. Um, and uh, and also get confident in what I was doing, get confident in how good my service was. And once I upped my price to where it should be, um, that got rid of the clients that were too expensive to keep and got me the target audience that I wanted that saw the value in the service. Um, and that was big. I mean, you show your value by what you do and what you say. So that's my answer to that.
Thank you, Heather. I feel like we have that a lot of us have that pricing conversation a lot. And I think especially service-based businesses trying to, like you said, know your value. So if
Yeah,
anybody, if there's 3 words that anybody takes out of this and starting your business, know your value is a good 3 words to write down.
yeah.
Seth, what about you? Last but not least.
Yeah, so for us, we kind of jumped into things, full steam ahead into, um, we had capital lined up, which helped us. However, we jumped into a child care center that was going to be closing and basically took it over. Um, and it was a little bit larger than we were expecting or had planned for. And and so my word of advice here would be is if you have the ability to start smaller and grow, to do that rather than jumping into something, jumping in over your head. We started at 5 to 6,000 square foot building with 75 kids, and 30 employees. And that's what our space is now. We started small, but needing to fill that space in order to pay for it. And we did so within 3 months. And it led to issues with, how to, more so in following our own policies and um, adhering to adhering to those policies to deal with issues between staff and just the growing pains so quickly. Um, and it took us a little while to figure out how to manage so many people so quickly. Um, and so yeah, my word of advice is to start smaller if you have the ability to.
Perfect, perfect. Good advice. I think you all touched on some of the most common challenges, need more money, don't understand my value, started too big, jumped in too fast, had to react, or also what Jordan touched on, scaling up, time to grow, and all of a sudden you got to let go of some of that control, some of the reins, and whether or not you have employees, you realize the need for knowing which resource to pull and when, so that it doesn't all fall on you. Um, and I think you learn about yourself a lot along the way too, your strengths and weaknesses. So, um, thank you all. I'm gonna shift gears a little, and for those of you that have the list of questions, I'm flipping them just a touch because we talked about the challenges, the big. I think you all touched on some of your biggest challenges when you first started, regrets, so to speak. So let's shift a little and let's talk about something positive. And the funny thing is, I think this is actually going to be a harder question for you all because people love talking about where they went wrong, but I want to know, share with everyone, what are you most proud of in your business, where you're at? Something, what are you most proud of? And this time, let's start with Jordan.
So, like you said, this is one of the hardest ones. I think when I was answering, I stared at this one the longest. Because I thought about all of my failures and shortcomings and just things that didn't go to plan. But when I was sitting there, like just really stuck on those kind of like negative things that we think about, I tried to shift my thinking and I thought about all the times that did happen. Things didn't go to plan, but I didn't give up. Like I found a way to get around them, whether I booked an advisory meeting and kind of just worked through the problem, or if I, found a new solution, whatever it was, like having a business and like owning one, there's no fallback person. Like it's you. So you have to solve all those problems and figure things out. So I'm really proud of the fact that like I was able to do that and get through all those things, and there wasn't like a single hardship. There's been many, but there wasn't a single one that really said, all right, that's it, I'm throwing in my hat. So just sticking with it and getting through all those obstacles is probably the thing that I'm the most proud of.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's go to Heather. What are you most proud of?
Um, Probably along similar lines as Jordan, but I think it also ties in what I said about knowing your value. When I realized that I needed to up my prices to a more appropriate level, um, my longtime clients had been spoiled, so to speak, and um, I lost a third of my business. And so I think what I'm most proud of is that I went through that and being in the red every month, and I didn't throw in the towel, and I just I reached out to um, you know resources for advice per se, but they can't tell you what to do. They can't tell you what to do. Like Jordan said, it's up to you, to make the decisions. But I've been fortunate to have good coaches and mentor in my corner to help me along, and now I'm not in that situation anymore. I'm in the black every month and just hired a director of operations, and I had to let two nurses go because I had kind of overhired. Um, and it wasn't because they were bad nurses. They were very good nurses, but it was my mistake that I hired them too quickly. I grew too quickly. Um, and so now I've hired two nurses again, and we're growing in Portland as well as Hamden. So I guess weathering the storm, despite, some pretty serious obstacles that could have done me in. Yep.
Thank you. Isn't it funny? So far, half the panel has cited negative things, the storms, the bad things that happened, and what they're most proud of, the good that come, the opportunities that come out of those disruptions is huge. So, kind of jot that in your mind for inspiration when you're in those hard moments, because progress is certainly not linear. Let's go to Seth. What are you most proud of?
I think even though we had those growing pains in the beginning, one of the things that we're most proud of is that we have had the benefit of being successful pretty much right from the get-go. Again, we did have an appropriate amount of capital lined up, in which we were able to get out from underneath pretty. We haven't had to use any additional debt to continue with our business venture. Our biggest expense with 30 employees in the childcare industry is 80% plus of our budget is all payroll. And it's a very little profit margin. And even in the beginning, we were able to, at the very least, break even if we weren't highly profitable. Well, it's childcare will never be highly profitable, but it pays the bills and is enough to get by. I was able to quit my full-time job within the first 6 months to come over to help as well. And so it's sort of a family commitment. My wife and I worked really well together in terms of being able to run a childcare business with her 15 years plus of experience in childcare and my 15 years plus experience in business operations and entrepreneurship, uh, everything has worked really well, pretty much right from the get-go. Um, overcame a few obstacles that people didn't think we would be able to do so quickly. So
Sure, thank you. A great example of a unique industry too, with childcare is one that it needs to be serviced, and it's a thankless job, like you said, short profit margins. You hear a lot of childcare businesses closing and a lot of staffing issues there. So definitely a unique industry. So thank you for sharing. And Vienne, what are you most proud of?
Um, I would say so. It's two things, but I feel like they're intertwined. So in the restaurant industry, it's notorious for having insanely high turnover rates, right? Like I think the last time I looked up this statistic, the average restaurant has a turnover rate of 150% a year, meaning within 1 year, right, the staff will turn over 1.5 times completely on average. And so at my restaurants, COVID notwithstanding, we have generally averaged a 30% retention rate, or 30% turnover rate, which means, a third of our staff will leave annually a year. So we've like kind of reversed it a little bit, right? Um, and I've done that through, very careful employment practices. We've always set out to, put as much into the quality of the job as we have the quality of the food, right? And I started off with just working on the job a lot and making sure that the employment practices we had and the quality of the job and the training and just the culture of the place was really what I wanted to be, a place that I want to work. National um, press for our food and our services. So my Vietnamese restaurant has been on like the New York Times list for best restaurants 1 year, and we've got 4 James Beard nominations. So it's not just that the accolades, but it's that we can have high retention and a good job while getting those accolades, right? Because what I wanted to prove to myself is like you can have a good job and be a good restaurant. You can you can treat people well and be excellent at what you do, right? And so that's really what I'm most proud of is that hopefully we're showing people that a little bit by the way by the attention that we get and the way we treat our staffs.
Nice. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting point too. I think it's often hard to sort of toot your own horn to talk about yourself and your business. Like I said, that question, that what are you proud of question is hard because it requires all of you to talk about something good you did, which by the way is also the theme of the next question. But Vian brings up the point that when you do good and then you toot your own horn, it also exemplifies for others how they can also do good. Just like this conversation today is hopefully helping the folks that are listening in learn from you as well. Um, so shifting a little bit, although along the same lines, I want to talk a little bit about some improvements and how you improved. And you may take this question, so something you're better at now than you were when you started, and how did you get better? What was the process that you saw through that improvement? And you may talk about yourself as an owner, as an individual, or something that your business as a whole improved upon. Let's start with Seth on this one. What is something that you do better now than when you started, and how did you get better?
um, the big thing that comes to mind is, I mentioned it before, is our own policies. Obviously, we have everything to follow in terms of the state licensing guidelines, but which we uphold, all of the time. But it was our own policies, internal policies, and business policies that we became very flexible on in order to maintain our commitments to the families. Um, in childcare, you're required to have a certain number of staff in the building per child, on different age groups. And in order to do so, you need the people here. And so we sort of let people, for lack of better terms, walk all over us for a year and a half, in terms of, taking time off for things that they really shouldn't have, just didn't want to come to work today type of thing. But I'd rather them not come to work today and show up tomorrow because we're going to need them. And uh, ultimately, it was the realization that we were just being completely burnt out by this, as were other team members that were filling in, and picking up the slack. Um, and overcoming it was the realization as to how tired we were and the way it was affecting the team. And we just sort of flipped the light bulb on at a staff meeting one day and said, enough's enough. Here's our policies. We expect at this time moving forward that they're going to be followed. And uh, it took maybe 2 weeks from there for people to realize that we weren't kidding. We probably lost 4 or 5 staff members within that first month of, you're going to tell me that you were in a car accident and post pictures of yourself partying in Nashville. It's not gonna go over well. Um, we're just gonna part ways and we'll figure it out from there. Um, and so, really following what you expect. And, obviously you need to work with people to an extent, but if it's not helping you move forward, then it's not worth it. And the burnout of trying to pick up all the slack is going to catch up to you eventually.
Improvement born out of frustration commonly happens when you have lots of employees. Vian, what about you?
I think I'm gonna piggyback off what Seth just said and sort of frame it as like really kind of defining what I wanted the sort of employer-employee relationship to look like, right? Like, I mentioned um, how starting off wanting to make the job a really high quality job. And I relate to a lot of what Seth just said about like in the beginning, I just kind of said yes to everything the employees asked for, and um, realized that wasn't working for it wasn't working for the majority of the people in the organization. And so it took a long time to sort of really define, okay, we wanted to do a different relationship with our employees, but what does that relationship look like? How should that work in practice? How should that work in a business setting, in ways that can work for more people? Um, and so we've worked really hard to define what that looks like for us and set expectations for the employer, but also for the employee, so that it is a more functioning, healthy relationship. Um, and so that's taken a lot of time. So that starts with not just our policies, like Seth said, and being consistent with the application of those policies, right? But the hiring process, when I started, my hiring process probably was about an hour total, which is still more than most restaurants. I think most restaurants, it's like a 5-minute phone call and then you have the job or you don't. Our hiring process now, if you make it to the end, it's a total of a 7-hour process over, 4 different interactions, right? Where there's multiple layers of screening and a lot of questions we ask the person, and a lot of expectation setting and a lot of really trying to understand who we're getting, but also being really upfront about where they're going to work and what it's like to work here and what do you need to have to be successful here, you know? And so I would say the thing that I've worked on the most and improved upon the most is how, like, being better at defining that relationship and setting expectations for the employer-employee relationship.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Jordan, what about you?
I would say that mine kind of goes hand in hand with like communication and confidence. And like I've always been able to talk to people one-on-one and whatnot. But like I said before, like most of my income stream comes from markets. So I'm engaging with people that I mean, some customers, they're just repeat customers, we've gotten to know each other pretty well over the years, but a lot of people are new, especially when I travel to different places all over Maine or New Hampshire. So meeting new people all the time. And when I first started, I was so shy. Like people would come to my market and I'd be like, hi, here's my stuff. If you want to buy it, that'd be cool. And now I'm totally different perspective because like in the skincare industry specifically, it's like extremely competitive, especially in at like markets and festivals. So you really need to step up to the plate and like really present yourself and your product in a different way. So I've definitely improved upon that and being able to stand out and try to emphasize the points of my business that set me aside from the other people, you know, that are also selling similar products. And then just being confident in what I'm selling and like what I'm doing and my mission and um, all of that because that's I know I mean I work with Allie as my advisor here and there's been many calls where we've had where she's like you gotta just you know, you're not trying to compete with Walmart. Like you got a good product, like believe in yourself kind of thing. Cause I very frequently I'm like, you know, I don't know. And just like knowing the value and worth of what I have and kind of like Heather was saying about having to like raise your prices. That's something I recently had to do. And honestly, the reason I struggled with it the most, because it was like less, it was like a 10% increase in price. So it wasn't very much, but my biggest struggle was just like the confidence I had, you know, to do that. And I did it, right? And all my customers are like, that's no big deal. And they keep buying it, you know? And so just being able to communicate effectively and like believe in not just like your business, but also yourself as a business owner doing, you know, what you're trying to do. That's definitely a big area of improvement that I've made and am continuing to make.
It reminds me of the visual of the fish swimming just below the surface of the water and it's wearing a shark fin on its head. So it's like everybody else, the customers, the world, even the other business owners at the markets, they see the shark fin. They don't realize that you're just a fish under there, just a little fish. So I love that. Love that along the theme of knowing your worth. And Heather, what about you? Improvements and how
Yeah.
you did that?
And I just want to comment on what Jordan said. I think, you know, at the point that I raised my prices and lost a third of my business, at that point I had become resentful. And that is not why I started a business, to become resentful. And so it's like, well, it's them or me. I'm going to survive. I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it work. Right. But as far as what I feel I've improved upon, having started this, you know, and being on my own, doing everything all by myself for 3 years, from making appointments to doing the care to the marketing to everything, um, I am much better at delegating, and quite honestly, I really would rather not provide the care now because it's a whole different mindset than running the business. I love providing the care, but it's a whole different mindset. It's kind of like again, whether you're running your business or you're on the fry later or wherever you are, it's it's a whole mind shift, and you can't take the business ownership, you know, hat off to go out and cook. You still have that ownership mentality and everything kind of gets jumbled. So that's one of the benefits of really learning to delegate to the appropriate people, um, and you holding on to what you're best at and what can create the most revenue for your role. So delegation, I would say, is one of my biggest improvements.
It's a delicate balance and a skill for sure. Well, we have one planned question left that we're going to get into, but before I ask, just want to give our attendees a chance. Like I said, throw questions in the chat if there's anything you want to throw at these folks before we sign off. But the last thing, I want to just go around and hear from each of you. And this is hard because I'm going to ask you to just one piece of advice, one thing, if you can share with our folks in attendance today, whether they're planning to start a business or they're running their business, but just looking to get a little bit of camaraderie or commiseration from you four. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone starting or running their business that you'd like to share today? And we'll start with Heather.
I think you've got to love what you do. You need to be passionate about what you do. You need to see the value in what you do because that passion sells. And when you do have the obstacles or the days that you don't feel that great, the passion is what keeps you going. Um, Knowing that you're bringing a good product to market or a good service to people that need it or good food to patrons, great care for parents that are working and their children are such a precious thing to them. Um, Believe in yourself and be passionate about it, and that will get you through. Because if you're not passionate about it, let's face it, entrepreneurship is not for the weary. So,
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you, Heather. And Seth, what about you? One piece of advice.
I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. Um, Learn from others what has worked and what hasn't worked. Not everyone will be willing to help you. Um, and move on to the next person and ask someone else. See where they've made mistakes and what's been successful and try to adapt them to you. Use your resources like SBDC and there's plenty of resources out there. Find people that are in your industry and network and make friends and get involved with whatever support groups or social media, Facebook pages, etc., that are out there, and use them to your advantage to to ask for that help.
Yeah, really good point there. Even if it's not common practice in the rest of your life, small business ownership will humble you and remind you that you can't do it all on your own. Thank you, Seth. Vian, what about you?
Definitely gonna do a shameless plug. And my best piece of advice is call on the SPDC. And it's a very, very useful resource. And I use it before when I was running the restaurants. I wish I'd knew about it sooner. And as an advisor, I keep thinking to myself, I wish people called me sooner. And so, running a business, you can feel very alone, right? Like if you're the only owner, if you have no employees, and I think everyone has said this in some part, but the SBDC is such a great partner for business owners, and to help you not feel less as alone in doing it too.
Love it. Love that your advice is to call you
Yeah, call me.
or me. Love the shameless plug. I feel like with the no cost service, I don't feel too gross giving that advice to people because we're not trying to, charge you money. Thank you, Ian. And Jordan, what about you? One piece of advice.
So I was really gonna kind of say kind of the same thing as everyone else. But like let's like Seth said, like asking for help and then also using the SBDC. But if you those are great, if you're starting or if you're in the middle, but if you're like thinking about starting, the best advice I could really give you is to, well, get an advisor, but also like sit down and really think about like what is your business? Like, what is that going to look like? How is it going to change your current lifestyle? Like for me, I have a product-based business and I work out of my apartment. So it's taken over the majority of my home. So my work-life balance is really intertwined. Um, and like doing markets, like that's not something I originally anticipated. I originally thought I'll just sell online, but you need to get out there to get people to your site online. So I do markets every weekend. So that means I have to give up a lot of time with like family and friends for events on the weekend. So these are all things that I never really thought about when I was first starting my business that I kind of wish I did to try to maybe have structured it a little differently to have better balance. So I would really sit down and try to visualize to the best that you can, because obviously whatever you think is going to happen is not going to be fully accurate, as we know. But I would try to visualize like what your goals are, what lifestyle you want to live, how it's going to impact your work-life balance, financial stability, all of those different avenues, and see if the way that you maybe continue to structure your business is going to align with the way that you want your life to kind of play out, I guess.
Really good point. Good points all around. I'm going to post in the chat the 4 tips. I think I've paraphrased appropriately. If you're going to take something away from this webinar today, take those tips away because I think they're all good advice. And I am a little biased to the third one there. But last chance, if folks want to if anybody attending wants to put any questions in the chat for our panelists, please do so. But I really, huge thank you, Jordan, Heather, Vienne, and Seth, for being here today and having this conversation, being vulnerable and open to sharing and reflecting on your the good, bad, and the ugly of your journey so far. I'm sure it's been great value to the folks attending. We won't be sharing the panelists' contact information, but if you do have follow-up questions, send them. We'll get a follow-up email from Erin from the SBDC with the link to a recording and a link to a survey, which we'd appreciate if you could complete. But if you do have follow-up questions, go ahead and reply. Yeah, with the exception of Vienne, his information's out there. But the rest of the panelists, if you do have specific questions, especially for their specific industries, product, childcare, service, medical, any of those, let us know and we can ask the panelists and with their permission connect you. But we're getting some thank yous in the chat. But thank you again. Huge thanks to our panelists. Oh, we do have one question in the chat. A business that's been around for 30 plus years, but with a very different landscape from when the business started. Would the Maine SBDC be helpful?
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was gonna say
absolutely.
yes. Yes. Um, and at the very least, if what you need is a different resource, we can often, connect you with that. So our door is free to knock on. It never hurts. But yeah, the landscape is changing. I mean, with COVID and then with all the change in the world right now, a lot of people are dealing with that in their business and that ability to adapt. I think sometimes you underestimate that when you start your business. It's like, oh yeah, there's going to be all these external factors I have to deal with. What do I do? So yeah, we are here for that at the SBDC. Agreed. Things are changing faster now than ever. And who would have thought we'd say that after COVID? Well, thank you again to our panelists and everyone that attended today. Really appreciate you being here, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone.